Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Fair Game Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Smith. I want to just take a quick second and thank you all for your patience the last couple of weeks. We were supposed to get episodes out, and then between being extremely swamped at the Heart of Texas Fair, which is a good thing, they had a really great fair this year. Between that and then all our plans for the last week and a half kind of went up in smoke because we were supposed to get down to Tampa for the Hillsborough County Fair, and we didn't know at that point if the fair was going to happen because Hurricane Milton had just hit. So I was reluctant to drive all the way to Tampa and then leave my stuff there on the chance that they end up having to cancel the fair, and then I have to drive all the way back to New Mexico. So we kind of tossed the schedule around and left the stuff on the fairgrounds in Waco. I'm super grateful to them for being so accommodating. And I flew home from Dallas so that way I could vote and make sure I voted in person. Super important, by the way. If you haven't voted, make sure you get your vote in, lock it in. Don't wait for you know, voting machines or things to go down or have potentially very long lines on election day. If you have the opportunity to early vote in person, highly recommend it. So anyhow, that's the reason for last couple of weeks that we ended up not getting an episode out. My apologies on that. Thank you for your patience. Today's episode, let's get right into it. We're going to go through 7 tips particularly for newcomers, but this can be reviewed for veterans as well, to the IFE industry, to the fair industry. Those of you who are going to be at IFE in Phoenix here we are just about 40 days out, just under 40 days. So if you're going to be exhibiting at the trade show, and a lot of this is geared towards entertainers, but certainly I think it can apply to people if you provide blue ribbons, right, for the FFA shows, or if you have ticketing software or anything like that. I think a lot of these tips might have some impact on you as well. So if you are an associate or service provider for our industry, and for darn sure if you're a new first timer, you need to listen to this episode. If you're a fair manager, certainly you can listen to it as well. I think you might get some takeaways from it, and you might even be sitting there saying, yeah, that's right. Robert's right about that. And I would be right, because what I'm sharing isn't my personal opinion. Over the course of the season of the Fair Game Podcast, I've asked fair managers and entertainment managers and the like. I've asked performers all variations of the question. That is, if I'm sitting with a fair manager on the podcast, I would say to them, what is it you wish performers knew about book getting into your fair, about the buying process, etc.? And I might do a variation on that question for an entertainer and say, what is it you need a fair manager to know about your show and about what you're dealing with? The hope of that question throughout the season was to try to get more insight on what's going on in the thought processes on both sides of that coin. So I have compiled a bunch of it. Some of it we made it in the show. Some of it's just out there in podcast world. You're welcome to go listen to it. So with that said, this won't be too long of an episode today, but we want to give you some real value. So we're going to give you the 7 tips for associates at the IAFE Trade Show this year. Tip number 1, be involved. Absolutely need to be involved. I made this mistake early on in my career where I would go to the trade show, I would exhibit, and when the trade show's over, I would go back to my hotel room and I would go find some local spot to go eat. I'd go by myself. Maybe if I knew a friend, I would go with a friend from the trade show, but I didn't take advantage of any of the extra opportunities. So you need to be involved. It seems like a no-brainer, but it's really difficult for a lot of us, especially those of us who are introverted. And those entertainers, some of y'all are going to hear this and you know who I'm talking about, or if I'm talking about you. You are so extroverted and so into people when you're performing. But when you're done performing, if you're anything like me, you're kind of like, you don't want to be around people. You kind of close up, and it can be really challenging to be in real social situations like we see at IFE. But you need to get involved, and here's some ideas on how you can get involved. First idea, straight away, if you're going to be there for Sunday night for the opening party, IFE is teaming up with RCS, with Ray Kamek Shows, to put on a really amazing opening party the way they've done they did one in Salt Lake. They did a really amazing one in Indianapolis. That going out to the state fairgrounds, man, like that was so cool. They really did a great job there. RCS is going to be setting up one of their Ferris wheels in downtown Phoenix. And keep in mind, this is Phoenix, so it ain't like it's going to be 35 degrees. You're probably looking at 65, maybe 70 degrees. It's going to be beautiful weather because it's Phoenix. So they're going to have their Ferris wheel set up. We're going to have Conjure Fortune Machines going to be out there. We're going to have a bunch of other entertainers out entertaining the folks. It is a mix and mingle event. So make sure you're there. Do not be selling while you're out there, but make sure you're there. Introduce yourself, talk to some folks. That's a really great opportunity to meet people. The other way you can get involved, go sit in at roundtable sessions, at education sessions. When you have an opportunity, go sit in on those. And I know it's like par for the course. Somebody's going to listen to this and go, but we can't because they schedule them against the trade show. No, they don't. Go look at the schedule. There might be one or two things that are like maybe YP or a zone, some kind of a zone officers meeting, but all the ed sessions and roundtables are scheduled outside the trade show. I'm pretty sure they have absolutely minimized that. So go look at the schedule, find some stuff that you're interested in, and go sit in on those ed sessions. Listen to the people. Go introduce yourself afterwards and say, hey, you said such and such about this, and that resonated with me. That I like that, and make an introduction. But whatever you do when you're getting involved in these things, go easy on the selling, which brings me to tip number 2. Quit with the nonstop selling. If you are a newbie, do not plan to come in and be nonstop selling because you'll end up kind of getting a black eye if you do that. Figuratively, of course. Some associates obviously are only interested in closing the deal. I get it. They got to run a business and generate revenue just like we all do, but it makes it difficult for all the rest of us. Instead, I would offer that you should work on building relationships with these fairs. Now, are there some fairs out there who just couldn't care less whether you sell? Yeah, but they're few and far between. I'm telling you, if you want easy money, quick success, and ultimately flame out of this industry within like 2 or 3 years, then just focus only on selling. You'll make good money. You'll get booked. And 3 years from now, people won't be able to stand you and they won't book you. We see it happen. If you actually want to build a business, if you want to enjoy long-term success in our industry, get to know the buyers. Here's a insider tip how to do that. And I offer this because I've been there. It can be a little overwhelming when you first come to the convention. Start the relationship building before the convention. And here's how you do that. Every issue of Fairs and Expos magazine, you need to read it. You need to figure out who these people are that are writing the articles in Fairs and Expos magazine. Most of them, believe it or not, are not IAFE staff members. Most of them, they're agriculture directors, they're deputy fair directors, they're entertainment managers, all the like, right? Read those articles. Go figure out, and it'll say right in the article, this was written by Joe Blow of the Minnesota State Fair. Cool. Go try to find Joe Blow's address from the Minnesota State Fair website or wherever you can track down that contact information. Don't send them an email saying, hey, I'm a great juggler. Nobody cares that you're a great juggler just yet. Send them an email and say, hey, Joe, I read your article in Fairs and Expos magazine. Really liked when you addressed the point about such and such, fill in the blank, right? Because that means this to me. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And then the key thing is close with a question. I'm curious, Joe, what do you think about doing such and such, including this clause in a contract? Maybe the article is about contracts. What do you think about including a clause for this? Would that be helpful to fairs? Something like that. Don't tell them I'm the best juggler, I'm the best magician. They're just going to delete it and you're going to come across as insincere. But if you go find these articles, whatever the person is you need to meet, or maybe you don't realize you need to meet them, but they could be good contact at some point. Send them that email. You should send 5, set a goal to send a minimum of 5 of those emails every single time one of those magazines comes out. Okay. And this is just with Fairs and Expos magazine. I'm telling you, you can do it with other things because every state and provincial association's got a newsletter that's got a handful of articles in it. You can do the same thing with, but especially if you're new, send it out. Send 5 to 10 emails every time one of these editions of the magazine comes out. Now, that means that over the course of the year, you're going to send somewhere between 30 to 50 emails about these articles. Cool. And out of that 30 to 50 emails, you're going to get between maybe 8 to 12, maybe 15 responses if you do the email correctly. Once they respond and say, well, hey, Robert, thanks for noticing that on the article. Yeah, I really think such and such. And hopefully they answer your question. And now just reply back with, thanks for that, makes a lot of sense, or gives me something to think about. Appreciate your time. Hey, are you going to be at IAFE this year? Actually, I am. Cool. Well, I'll look forward to meeting you then. Leave it at that. Now, because you have done the pre-work, right? You've done the prep work ahead of time. Now, when you see them at the trade show, you can walk up to them and say, hey, Joe, I'm Robert. We sent an email back and forth about your article in the magazine. How's the convention going for you? Enjoying it? Oh, yeah, Robert, really enjoyed it. Thanks for your comments, by the way. It really meant a lot. And then a lot of the times you're going to get now, Robert, tell me about you. What do you do here at the convention? What's your role here? And there's your opening. Well, actually, I have a online software company. We provide ticketing services, or I'm a juggler, or we run a pig race, or whatever the heck it is. You do that, now you've got real connections and you've built context. So now when you start talking about your show at the convention and trade show, they don't feel like you're just selling. Now they start to feel like they're talking to somebody that knows them and cares a little bit about them, which leads me to tip number 3, know your audience. And the reason I say that is because precision strikes in this industry will beat casting a wide net. Always will beat casting a wide net. But I'm talking to a fair manager on the podcast several years ago. These were during the pandemic episodes. And the fair manager tells me a story and he goes something like this. Entertainer sends an email that says, hey, Mr. Fair Manager, I'm an entertainer who has XYZ show, and I'd be just great at your fair. Your fair would love me. And I happen to be driving between this fair and that fair, and your dates are open. I'd be a big hit at your fair. And the fair manager tells me that his initial, like his visceral gut reaction, not what he replies back, but his gut reaction is, oh, really? You'd be great fit at my fair? Tell me everything you know about my fair. Where would I put you on the fairgrounds? How many times have you even been to my grounds? What makes you think you would be such a great hit at my fair? Are you familiar with our demographic and the people that come to our fair? No, 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 and no. Then what the heck are you doing telling me you'd be a great fit? Because you don't know. As entertainers, many of us have fantastic shows. We're fun, we're memorable, we're entertaining. These are all excellent attributes to have in a show. But we suck at marketing. A lot of us are absolute trash at marketing. We love to just declare that our shows are awesome and everybody loves us. Every fair we go to, they love us. That's not true. It's almost like declaring you're the king. And if I may quote Game of Thrones, any man who has to yell out that he is the king is no true king. Part of being a great marketer is knowing who you're selling to. And what I mean is this, and here's an actual example. In the early days of doing my Conjure Fortune Machine attraction, I would take any and every booking I could. It didn't matter how far away it was, how close it was. But what I found very quickly was that there were markets and certain environments that Conjure just doesn't work in. On the environments, a lot of fairgrounds, obviously, that you'll find, many of us have found in the industry that they're old. They're maybe just out in dirt lots and they're kind of a pop-up fairground out of nowhere for 7 days or 10 days. Well, what I found early on was all that fine dirt trying to roll Conjure out to wherever it was going to be performed. That dirt gets in everything. It gets in the bearings and the wheels and binds them up. It gets in the audio equipment. It can get into the contacts on the electronics for like the LEDs. It's just it's a mess. So I realized that I have to be cognizant of that there are environments that Conjure does not work best in, but there's also certain markets that it doesn't work in. What I found with those markets, like as an example, there's some places in very rural America that have great fairs. They have amazing guests, great folks. But if those people are as rural as some of these folks in rural America are, they just don't have the exposure to entertainment to understand what a fortune machine is. That is not an insult to them. I mean, nothing bad about these folks. They are amazing people. They go see the Conjure Fortune Machine and they're not quite sure what it is. And they're like, I'm not going anywhere near that thing. So it can make it. Now, they know what a magician, they know what a juggler is, right? They get all that. But if you have this kind of abstract, more creative presentation, it can be a struggle. And what I found over the years is that living fortune machines like Conjure Machine do much better in a more urban environment because you get people that have been much more well traveled, more exposed. The one exception to that was when I found Clovis, New Mexico, which is kind of it's an ag town, really, but Clovis, New Mexico, where you would think that Conjure might not do so well at the Curry County Fair, which I did years ago, did actually really well. But what we found out is because Cannon Air Force Base is right there. And so you have a whole bunch of airmen and their families that are coming out to the fair. And they have seen fortune machines when they were stationed in Germany or wherever they were. So they've got more exposure to it. So when I say tip number 3 is know your audience because a precision strike beats a wide net, you don't want to be wasting your time trying to negotiate and even go do these fairs and find out, oh man, this is just not a good environment for me to be in. And then people think that you don't have a good product. And overall, you might get a check, but did you really win in the long term? Probably not. Tip number 4, and this goes right along with kind of what we just said, know your product, know what your product is. And that means how much your fee is and know 100% of your requirements. In no condition, in no circumstance, should a fair manager walk up to you at the trade show and say, hey, John, this seems like a really cool juggling show. What's your price? How much is it? And then John responds with, well, what's your budget? Wrong answer. Because I understand what you're saying is because they might say you may have different levels of shows. You might have just a little basic street show that lasts 20 to 30 minutes, or you might have some grand production show that might have multiple people in it and there's different prices. That's fine. But asking, well, what's your budget doesn't answer the question. You need to be able to answer that question. What's the price of the show? You need to be able to answer that completely, not jerk them around. For Conjure Machine, it's one dude, one machine. And if they come up and they ask me a question, how much is it? I'm going to say, this is the price and I do this many shows. And maybe there's a little negotiation. Well, could you do an extra show on the weekend or maybe do 2 during the week and 4 on the weekend, something like that. That's fine. But here's the price. The end. It's super simple. If you want a little bit better price with our company, if you can do a multi-year deal, you can get a little bit better price. Very simple, cut to the chase. I don't need to know, well, what's your budget? Okay, let's just say they go, well, I have $1 million entertainment budget. That doesn't make Conjure a Fortune Machine $1 million act. You got to figure out the ways to deliver that information and be very precise. Also, know your requirements. And what I mean is this. If you need a stage that you need 30 foot wide and you need it to be clear, meaning, we can share the stage with another act, but all of their gear has to come off and all our gear has to go on. Maybe that's a requirement. Just be very, very clear. How much power do you need at the stage? Are they providing this, the fair providing a PA system? If so, how many mics? Do they need instrument cabling and things like that? Do they need a backline if you're a band? All that stuff. You need to the act have to communicate that. And if you're being represented by an agent, you need to make sure you're communicating and usually this is via a writer to your agent, and the agent is giving the full information to the fair. That's absolutely critical that all that happens so that you avoid a situation like I was informed of, a year or so back, where I was talking to an agent and he was livid with a fair manager, even went as far as calling her that woman, which was like, oh, damn, you're pissed. And as the conversation went on, I realized, wait a minute, you screwed this up, not that woman, because the agent failed to communicate the act's requirements to the fair and to the fair manager. And so the agent was trying to say, well, we need this much more money. You got to be able to pay and do such and such a thing. And the fair was like, yeah, no, this is the contract we signed. This is what we're sticking to. So if you want to avoid that situation, make sure you are absolutely clear. If you're not sure, I'll just give you this. If you're creating a rider and you think, well, they know to do that. No, they don't. Put it in the rider. They know we need electric. No, they don't. Put it in the rider. All of it. How many, do you need 110? Do you need 220? Like, what do you need? Everything. Put it in the rider. Spell it out. That's the easiest way to facilitate being when you're at the grounds. But you might be wondering, well, okay, but this show is about, having a good trade show. That's just part of it, because even if you're not signing a contract, you should be able to hand over a list or either a hard copy and say, tell them, let me get your email address. I'll send you everything. Because your requirements, they may look at it and go, oh, we don't have that much space. Can't do that. Or we don't provide this, or we don't. And now, like, you don't want to wait until the contract's signed and then say, oh, by the way, here's this. So make sure you get on that stuff early. Tip number 5, let's get back more specifically to the trade show. Booth production. Let's talk booth production for a minute. Promo videos. Promo videos should, if you're going to have them, should be on a television that I would say put at a minimum of like 24 inches. And it needs to be up as close to like eye level as possible. 27 is like, well, 24 to 27 would be the minimum size. If you've got something bigger because you're driving or you're renting something from the venue, cool. But the reason I say you want a minimum of 27, maybe even 24, and you want it at eye level is this. Let's say you've got a couple people that are up at you've got a table up in front. They're looking at your promo. You got somebody talking to you. You still got dozens of people walking by in the aisles. So you want that up at eye level, one, because now people in the back can see as they're walking down the aisle. But two, a lot of us in the past, and I've done this, and I know it doesn't look great. It definitely is not conducive. We put it on an iPad. Well, even on the biggest iPad, that's still pretty small screen. And most of us end up setting it down on the table. So now, not only if anybody's in front of your table is that image, is the screen blocked, but the people who are at the table watching the video are now like craning their necks, looking down. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. It's much easier if it's up at eye level, or even better, if it could be, 6 feet, 7 feet up where they can look up at it. Even better, because now they get a really good view, and people from a further, more of a distance, they can see your setup, your video even better. Also know the rules about booth production. Like you can't be above 5 feet. Can't be above 5 feet, more than like 5 feet out from the back. Double check that. I know it varies from convention to convention, and Steve and the team at IAFE have been kind of loosey-goosey with that over the years. But the reason you don't want like a 8-foot tall banner out at the edge of your booth is because it cuts down sight lines, and you don't want your sight lines cut down. I don't want my sight lines cut down. So be a good neighbor. If you do have something that's a little bit taller, just check with the person next to you and say, hey, I've got this banner. It's the only spot can I put it? Are you against me having it there? I find Honey Empire, man, you win more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. Tip number 6, and this is one that is like, I can't say this enough, people. I cannot say this enough. Tip number 6, stay in your booth. Don't get mad at me. I'm just the messenger. But this is one thing that I heard over and over and over again from fair managers when I'm talking with them on the podcast. Don't go standing in the middle of the aisles trying to hand out your stuff. Don't go walking out in the aisles and trying to grab people and pull them into your booth. Do not go interrupt somebody else while they are talking to someone at another booth. I don't care if that person was just at your booth 20 minutes ago and you remembered something, or now you're back and you got a message that, oh, the fair manager from the Arkansas State Fair was looking for you. Do not go wandering around that floor to find them and then pull them back to your booth. Not okay. If you participate in that habit, and honestly, it's not the newbies that do this. Very rarely do the newbies do this because they're so nervous in the first place. They just stand there smiling. This is the veterans that do that. If you want to wander around and chat to people more freely, there is a social hour in the lounge. You can go there and do that. You can go meet people outside the trade show, but up and down the aisles, leave it alone. Stay in your booth. Speaking of veterans, that brings me to tip number 7. We're right here coming up on about 25 minutes on the episode. So this is perfect. We're going to wrap this up here in about the next 3 minutes. We need leadership from veterans. That's tip number 7. More leadership from veterans. And what I mean is this. Many of us know the fair manager. We've been in the game long enough. We know fair managers. We know entertainment directors. We know what their needs are. We're super comfortable talking to people. If you're obviously, I'm not talking about when you're at your trade show and at your booth time, because you're paying good money to be there to sell your product, and that should be the focus. But outside of that, don't be afraid to make an introduction of somebody new to a fair manager. If somebody's a first timer and they're super nervous, like try to remember where you were 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 25 years ago. Make that introduction. Say, hey, fair manager, I know you've mentioned before you're looking for such and such an act. I don't know if these guys would be a fit or not, but I wanted to make an introduction. This is Joe, fair manager. Hey, now they've got a little bit more comfort in conversing with each other, and maybe you can help help somebody else out in the industry. So make an introduction. Don't be afraid to invite them to dinner. Say, hey, I'm going out to dinner. We're going with just like Jack Prather did with me with Oscar the Robot many years ago. You get involved and you go out to dinner. Boom, I ended up with the contract. Well, don't be afraid to invite that person out and say, hey, where I'm going to, dinner with the Florida State Fair, or I'm going to dinner with State Fair, Texas, or wherever. Go have a conversation. Get them involved. That helps IAFE out. That helps the whole industry out. And honestly, it helps, I think in the long run, it helps create better acts and better relationships with fair managers, which works great for all of us. So those are 7 tips. Just to reiterate, be involved, quit with the nonstop selling, know your audience, know what your product is, how much your fee is, and 100% of your requirements. Make sure you've got good booth production. Stay in that booth. And if you are a veteran, please make sure you introduce a newbie to someone this year at the trade show and convention for IAFE, which will be in Phoenix, December 1st through 4th. That's just under 40 days from now. And we will look forward to seeing you then. Next week on the show, I will be back in Hillsborough County, Florida, getting ready for Hillsborough County Fair. We are going to open that fair come hell or high water. Does not matter what Hurricane Milton had to say about it. We're going to have the Hillsborough County Fair. And I will have for you next week 7 tips for fair managers, entertainment directors, and the like on how they can successfully navigate that trade show quickly and efficiently. Guys, if you stuck with me for all 28 minutes of this, thank you so much. I love you all. We will see you in Phoenix. Bye-bye.